Animal Jam was officially born in 2010. Created by WildWorks in collaboration with Nat Geo Kids, they aimed to make an online playground space for kids, and they did exactly just that. It wasn't quick until Animal Jam became the most popular game in its field, surpassing some of the giants in the industry along the way. 15 years later, while the Animal Jam you all know and love is still up and running, it's not as popular as it used to be. Despite this doesn't erase the vast amount of history this game has, from hackers to creepypastas to things you probably wouldn't have even believed actually happening on the game. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to this game. I previously made a video talking about an iceberg chart made for Animal Jam a few years ago. Iceberg charts are usually made for specific topics, with more known about facts near the top, descending all the way to the bottom to the most unknown and niche topics at the bottom. There's been a few made for Animal Jam over the years, including the one I previously covered. However, I always felt a lot was missing in a lot of these. So over the last few months, I've been working away on what I think is the ultimate Animal Jam iceberg in this giant chart for an equally giant video. Whether you still play Animal Jam or used to play in your early years, there's definitely some things in this video that you'll never have heard of. So I implore you to sit back and relax as we dissect and explain the definitive Animal Jam iceberg. So starting us off here strong, we have fman122. He is arguably the face of the game at this point. I'm not gonna lie to you, although unintentionally. This was a pseudonym assumed by Abracadabra Alakazam, also by another person who worked at Animal Jam HQ. I explained the entire story of how fman hacked and who was actually a part of this name in a previous video on the channel, but there's a lot of rumors regarding this name as well as how he actually hacked. You know, you hear the rumor of the "thanks for playing with me" Jamagram hacking people, but that was never the case at all. How he most likely hacked people is just through the use of getting people's parent dashboards switched to his email, because Animal Jam support was a lot lax back then and didn't have much clearances. He also made the very first password cracker for the game, I'm pretty sure, as well as obviously the other person, a part of fman122, literally working at Animal Jam, I imagine helped him. But definitely a staple of Animal Jam's identity and the biggest hacker ever on the game probably. Next up we have magenta items. These are error items given out by Animal Jam a lot of the time, usually because they didn't set the color ID of an item correctly when restoring it to a person's account. And as a failsafe method, the item usually reverts to the default base variant of the game, which is just pure magenta. Every item in the game is this pure magenta format and then has a color ID assigned to it afterwards. So usually when it failsafes, it just reverts to the base variant of an item. There's a numerous amount of these in the game, to a point where you could make an entire video about them, which I probably will at some point maybe. But a lot of these usually got into the game by Animal Jam themselves. There was a few that were glitched through other in-game elements like the sheep cloak, or just straight up sold in stores at some point. And then there was some that Animal Jam just kind of made magenta intentionally and sold in stores or gave out at some point as well. But this magenta item phenomenon was widely popular, especially in the earlier years of the game, and Animal Jam did make sure to ride that high anyway, that's for sure. The database breach on Animal Jam was a breach that affected over 46 million records on Animal Jam's database that was publicly posted on a hacking forum by the group known as Shiny Hunter. This group had nothing to do with Animal Jam. They, I believe, just went around different websites seeing if they could find vulnerabilities in them to try ransom databases from the companies to make money that way. They tried to do this to Animal Jam, and then when Animal Jam didn't cough up any money, they just released the whole database on a public forum, which obviously did not end well and still has effects to the game to this day. But a lot of accounts were affected by this. A lot of accounts were hacked, obviously. A lot of accounts have been banned as a result of this as well. And Animal Jam soon after did a mass reset on a lot of passwords for accounts affected by this, but for some reason it didn't actually reset accounts entirely that were affected by the breach. I'm not too sure why, but it was definitely the biggest hack in Animal Jam's entire history. Next we got Animal Jam YouTubers, like the person you're watching. That's me. I'm an Animal Jam YouTuber. But also there's been countless other Animal Jam YouTubers. What I'm referring to mainly here is like usually the pretty big ones back in the day that had like hundreds of thousands of subscribers that don't really make videos anymore. Obviously very iconic people in terms of helping the game grow over the years, that's for sure. And while a lot of those, pretty popular Animal Jam YouTubers from back in the day have kind of quit or disappeared now, there's still a good few YouTubers still kicking it, like myself, as I said. Nowhere near it used used to be like the Animal Jam scene. It definitely died on YouTube, but who knows, maybe sometime in the future a bunch of people will make more Animal Jam videos. This might be your sign to do it, you know? Next here we have spikes. This is just one certain item in the game. I have two sections here for just specific items because of how iconic they are on the game. Spikes are kind of the main item in the entire game. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's used as a measurement for bigger items in the game. Like black longs are used as measurements for bigger items when trading as well. And it's usually a stepping stone for people that do try to gain worth and build worth in the game in terms of trading. Even before that, the item was absurdly popular upon release when it was released through the monthly member gift system. And no matter what time period you joined and played the game, even if it was just for a little while, you definitely remember spiked collars, that's for sure. Most popular item in the game, I would imagine. Next we have Flash shutdown, which means the Adobe Flash player shutdown. Obviously Animal Jam runs on Flash, the Adobe Flash player engine, and has ran on that since the game launched in 2010. When it was announced Flash would be shutting down, the company did look at migrating to another game engine, but never ended up doing it. So when Flash was removed from all browsers and support was discontinued in early 2021, Animal Jam was forced to move over to a desktop app entirely that was on Electron that still runs natively on Flash, but it's very unoptimized, as you might have noticed if you've played in the recent years. But with Flash shutting down, Animal Jam was no longer available on browser anymore, meaning the only way you can play the game now is through the desktop app that Animal Jam has up to download. Next here we have headdresses, the second most popular item, I'd argue, next to spikes. Despite this item being one of the most controversial items in the game, it is still immensely popular amongst the player base. This item was first released in 2011 for Thanksgiving celebrations on the game, so probably not the best decision of Animal Jam, to be honest. And players, or specifically parents of players, were quick to point out that this is obviously just cultural appropriation, and were quick to complain to Animal Jam to bring action to this item. After 2011, they announced that the headdress would not be returned into stores for this very reason, and they have never returned to stores ever since. However, the item was given a rare tag in 2017, so that probably didn't help people trying to desperately get these after they grew popular years after leaving the stores. And now they're, you know, a pretty big staple on every person's outfits almost on the game. Still insanely popular and still insanely sought after. The Quackity Raid. This was a pretty big raid on the game done by the YouTuber Quackity, known as Quackity HQ at the time. He did a live stream where he raided the game with, I think it was 30,000 people, I'm pretty sure. He implored his audience to log into the game, dress up as yellow penguins, and spam duck rights amongst other inappropriate things on the game. Resulted in a lot of people in getting suspended, bubble chatted, or even straight up permanently banned from the game. I think there was a point even where Animal Jam just disabled chatting during that period on the game when Quackity was raiding it. Despite the amount of trolls that invaded the game at the time, it did bring a lot of new players to the game, and funnily enough, you still might see some of these Quackity raiders still on the game nowadays. You know, you still usually see a yellow penguin trying to relive the glory days, even though that was almost 7 years ago at this point, so you might want to let it go. Next is the Jambassadors. These are a group of players that are noticed by Animal Jam and given the title of a Jambassador, which is essentially a representative of the game. They usually host contests fulfilled by Animal Jam to get items to give away to players and stuff like that, and usually hold other events and stuff. Pretty much just noticeable players, you know, making content around the game, and Animal Jam comes along and offers them if they want to join their group of, you know, official Jambassadors. You know, just think of it like a normal ambassador for a game or something. Unfortunately, yours truly is not a part of that, but you know what, me making videos like this probably doesn't help. So they usually have some kind of strict criteria though, and it changes every time they do, you know, open applications for this title, but a lot of creators in the community usually strive towards being a Jambassador. Here we got another hacker on our hands, Wretched Jungle. This was the second biggest hacker on the game we saw in the earlier years of the game anyway. This hacker pretty much hacked a bunch of people for the rarest items in the game, and how they actually hacked people was unknown. I believe it was some kind of vulnerability with the password reset, because they were able to reset people's passwords, but they weren't able to take over people's accounts, essentially. You know, they weren't able to take it off a dashboard like F-Man was able to do. But this person pretty much just hacked a bunch of people, and after they got banned, and I guess Animal Jam fixed how they were hacking people, they just kind of disappeared. Nobody really knows who the true person behind this persona was, and it was never revealed all these years later still. You know, some people rumored it to be F-Man or other hackers around the community, but it was never proven to be them, and it still remains to be a mystery who actually was to this day. Next here we got bot raids. This started in 2020, I believe, where tools were made to pretty much automate a bunch of accounts at once to do one certain thing, and they would pretty much flood the game and create a whole lot of problems. As I said, I think this started in 2020, or at least that was the first time we ever saw it happen. They would take over rooms around the game, you know, changing colors, being in areas they wouldn't usually be able to be in, spam text chats and stuff like that. And it got so bad to a point where it was crashing the game at some points, and even crashing logins, not allowing players to actually log into the game. And there was some bots that were hosted by other hackers that I would refer to as rogue. They would pretty much spam players with buddy requests, jamagrams, or trade requests to try to lag them out or just fill their inbox up so they wouldn't be able to get more jamagrams. Just kind of ruining the player experience for people if they weren't already ruining the player experience as is. But yeah, I've made countless videos talking about this issue already. I don't think Animal Jam really knows an effective way to try to patch these out, so I believe they're just kind of waiting it out until the people that are doing it just stop for good, which, you know what, seems to be working for them, I'm not gonna lie, because there's been less and less of these as time goes on, so fingers crossed, guys, that they just end up stopping. AJMVs is an acronym for Animal Jam music videos. These were kind of an early jump starter to the Animal Jam YouTube space, I would say. This is just people, you know, making music videos of popular songs for Animal Jam, of course. As I said, these were like widely popular in the early 2010s, you know, getting millions of views sometimes. And they've kind of died out over the last few years, over the last 10 years, really. No, I don't see people making them anymore, and if they do, they're not like as explosive in popularity as they used to be, unfortunately, but there's still some people making them, which is nice to see. With this section, it's definitely like a time capsule anyway. You know, not too many people doing it anymore. Next here is Alden. This is just a world on the world list. However, this world is usually used by traders of the game. You know, this is usually the trading hub, if you will. Don't get me wrong, there's other worlds that are, you know, full of people as well that will trade and stuff, but usually people just default to Alden for old time's sake. I don't even know how it started to be the trading hub, but it always has been since as long as I can remember anyway, and I've been playing since 2010. But there's other trading spots in the game like Brady's Lab as well. You know, that's a notable one over the last few years. And obviously people would trade in Jamal Township, Lost Temple's House, stuff like that. Next here is Null. This is just a default name for when Animal Jam struggles to display usernames a lot of the time. Most notably when you try to follow a player, sometimes it will say Null's Den or something like that anyway. But people being paranoid on this game thought it was a hacker at first when it first started happening on the game. A lot of creepypastas were made of it, and some people even went as far as making an account named Null. However, there was no hacker ever known as Null. It was just a placeholder name that people assigned a meaning to. Next we have AJHQ. This is just referring to people that work at Animal Jam, so they're just all as a collective known as AJHQ, but it's also the name of the official account for Animal Jam on the game. It's just AJHQ. Pretty sure just the social media manager uses this. However, you know, it's a moderator account, if you will. Yeah, I imagine this was just made so people wouldn't impersonate them in game. The something went wrong error. This is so high up on the iceberg with how frequent this error is now. This error usually shows up when a player tries to log into the game. Sometimes it's caused by a variety of reasons. One, by people trying to log in too much at once, usually triggered by bots. The other, if you're just having bad internet, or third, the game's servers are just down, so you can't log in no matter what. This error usually only shows up on Animal Jam Classic's desktop app. There's an entirely different error when it shows up on Animal Jam Mobile, but figured I'd mention that too nonetheless. Next here we have selling items. I figured I'd put this here because it is so popular on the game now that most people do it, unfortunately. This is just referring to people selling items for real world money. There's usually like Discord chats that will host marketplaces or stuff like this. Obviously I'm just gonna discourage that here because it is against the Animal Jam rules, okay? So don't do it or else you're subject to being banned on the game. Obviously Animal Jam doesn't like people doing this. A lot of security concerns and I guess copyright concerns as well, I guess. But this is something that's been frowned upon on the game since like 2014 when it was implemented, I think, into the rules. So yeah, don't do it. Next here we have AJ role players. These are just people that role play on the game. You know, you usually see them in Serapia Forest back in the day. You know, I don't see too many role players anymore, unfortunately. You know, I guess that's like just another thing that's been lost to time on Animal Jam. But you know, those Warrior Cats role players, stuff like that, or like, you know, Adopt Me role players, those used to plague the game back back in the day. And I imagine most people watching probably have memories of that. Next here we have WildWorks. This is the company behind Animal Jam. They made Animal Jam. They were previously known as Smart Bomb Interactive when the game did start, and they rebranded the name of the company a few years afterwards, after Animal Jam started to take off. Some of you might remember that name, but yeah, their little company mascot is named Blinky, the little orange raccoon, tanuki thing. I don't even know what it is, I'm not gonna lie to you, but you might see it around the game because they like to incorporate that into items or pets and stuff. There's a lot of references to the company and the mascot of the company throughout both games. And the last part of the tip of the iceberg, the Lost Jammer. This is another creepypasta that was immensely popular in the game. A lot of people, you know, kind of applied different stories to him, kind of rumored it to be a hacker and stuff, and there was an actual account named the Lost Jammer on the game. However, I'm pretty sure it was deleted, and then Animal Jam themselves took the username and used it for a Halloween special on their YouTube channel. I don't think that's talked about enough. I thought that was funny to talk about though. So technically, the Lost Jammer is Animal Jam. But yeah, this is just a character almost. It's not a real person. It was never a real person. It was like never a hacker or anything like that. Just a creepypasta story essentially. Starting us off here at the second section of the iceberg is Adopt a Pet Toys. This was a promotional toy line Animal Jam made. These were little mystery boxes, if you will, of small pet toys that usually came with redeemable codes in-game that would give gems, diamonds, or even items and rare pets for players to obviously use and trade around and whatnot. It wasn't just limited to small little boxes though. There was actual toy sets as well, you know, figurines and plushes as well, all made in collaboration with Jazzwares Toys as well, and they continued to make these all the way up until 2018 when they discontinued their partnership with Jazzwares. Glitch variants is referring to items that were sold in stores incorrectly when they were initially sold, or distributed to players in incorrect colors. Kind of similar to magenta items, but the biggest offenders of this are the glitched rings, the first and second one, as well as the magenta furry. Magenta furry isn't a pure magenta item, it's just partial magenta, but it is glitched nonetheless. There are a few other examples as well, like the glitched black out elf tail, the Holiday antlers and earrings, stuff like that were sold in one variant when they initially came to stores but were later changed for one reason or another, most likely because the variants were incorrect. The Amazing Migration event was an event that took place in 2020 when Animal Jam went under a name change. The original Animal Jam that you all probably know, the 2D browser version, was changed from Animal Jam to Animal Jam Classic, and the mobile counterpart Animal Jam Play Wild just adapted the Animal Jam name and dropped the Play Wild name entirely. It was also announced that Animal Jam Mobile would be the main game going forward that would be receiving most of the updates, and Animal Jam Classic would be receiving a lot less, which we did end up seeing over the last few years. The Forgotten Desert is an adventure on Animal Jam Classic that has the best prize pool in the game, as well as the only flying animal adventure to ever exist. People usually play this to build up worth in the game and trade around and whatnot. The prize pool has been altered a few times over the years, but we'll get into that later in the iceberg. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, but free membership is when you get membership for free. There is actual legitimate ways that you could have or still can get free membership. In the past, there's been promotional codes Animal Jam has given out for 1 week or 2 week free memberships, and there's also ways in the mobile version of the game where you can grind sapphires to buy membership with sapphires for absolutely free. But there's also been scams over the years promising people with free membership that usually end up taking people's accounts and hacking them. Animal Jam has made sure to say that if you ever find a way to get free membership that isn't from them, it's probably not true. Next here is monthly member gifts. This used to be a tie-in to Animal Jam memberships where you would get a free item, pet, or den item every month just for subscribing to Animal Jam's membership. This was later replaced in 2013 with the Diamond Shop, and a lot of the items and pets, etc. were sold in the Diamond Shop when it initially came out. Obviously, a lot of players were upset by this change, but years later, I think people have just kind of gotten used to it. Next here we have item duping. There's been a lot of duplication methods over the years for items being duped. A lot of them had involved trading, but even recently over the last few years, there's been some item dupes that have incorporated my shops that I've talked about on the channel before, and some that even abuse Animal Jam's rollback system for accounts to duplicate items, which we saw in 2021. But yeah, most, if not every single way to duplicate items has been patched out of the game or isn't working anymore, so you don't have to worry about this if you are a current player of the game, but this is just referring to items being duplicated. Tunneltown was the very first spin-off mobile game for Animal Jam. This would pretty much just follow you taking care of a bunny burrow, trying to expand it more, decorating it, and you could also feed bunnies, get more bunnies by them dancing together, weirdly enough, and you could feed them to expand your burrow, as I said. Just a very normal kind of game, to be honest. I believe support for this only lasted about a year, and the only way you can save progress now is through, I think, iOS Game Center, because the Facebook linking with this app is completely broken now. AJ Jump was the game that followed Tunneltown, the second spin-off in 2013. You'd pretty much just play as a kangaroo and jump all the way up in the sky, see how far you could get. All the platforms would break underneath you. Pretty straightforward game, kind of like Doodle Jump if you've ever played that. I don't think support lasted too long for this. I don't think this ever got any updates past its release, but there used to be a tie-in for Animal Jam Classic that if you logged in with your Animal Jam account, you could get a pet Joey as well as transfer any gems you earned in the game over to your Animal Jam account, which was pretty cool. However, I believe the API endpoint for this game ended up breaking or something a few years afterwards, and I think now you just straight up can't download this game anymore off of any app store. So rest in peace to AJ Jump, but if you still have it, you can still play it. It's just not functional with any Animal Jam linking anyway. Next here we have Dash Tag. This was the final spin-off game to ever be released. You play as a pet that's running away from a panda. I guess it's supposed to be the pet sitter, and you just kind of keep running to try get other pets, which you can also unlock and play as. It's just an endless runner kind of game. You have dodged obstacles and whatnot. This game was supported for a bit after it launched, but it went through a number of years where it wasn't getting updated until randomly in 2023 it got another update with a lot of quality of life changes. But I don't think there's been another update since then, but it has at least been updated more than the other two before it. Breaking the ice and breaking the bridge, these are probably the two biggest myths in the entire game. When you have a bunch of players jumping on the ice section in Mount Shavir, it starts to break and crack, and there's actually an unreleased achievement in the files called Thin Ice for this, and it might actually signify that they were once planning on breaking the ice. Quite similar to breaking the bridge. If a bunch of players jump on the bridge, it will start to break and falling rocks will start displaying underneath. And there's also an unreleased achievement named Falling Rocks in the files that might also signify that they might have planned this to actually break at one point. Both of these myths, obviously, it's not possible to break the ice or the bridge. However, back in the day when people thought it was possible, a lot of rumors were surrounding it where you get free items or free membership even if you managed to break the ice or the bridge. Next here we have item generators. These were just phishing hacks that you'd see around on the internet in the early 2010s that people would host, obviously, to try hack people, but the premise was they would promise that you'd be able to generate any item of your dreams, and all you had to do was give them your username or password. Obviously not a thing that works, not a real thing, just a common phishing hack, and yeah, that's about it. Feral was another game made by Wildworks. While it wasn't related to Animal Jam or the Animal Jam series at all, it was tailored towards the older generation of Animal Jam players that probably left the game a long time ago. You'd play as mythological creatures and animals in this game and explore the expanse to get materials to craft into items and other things. There's also mini games you could play, and you could decorate your house or what was called a sanctuary. Additionally, later on in the game's life, it introduced microtransactions with a premium currency and a season pass, which was the going forward way on how you could have gotten more creatures to play as, I guess. The game wasn't too big of a success, and it stopped development and upkeep in about late 2021. Animal Jam actually had a collaboration with McDonald's where they had little Animal Jam plush toys in Happy Meals. However, also with the plush toy, you actually got a redeemable code in-game, where on both Animal Jam Classic and Animal Jam Mobile, you got to redeem a virtual plush toy where you could actually choose the color of, contrary to the random color you got in the Happy Meal. This ran in select locations for about a year, mainly some select locations in the US, South America mainly, as well as the UK and Ireland. I think it only ran for a few months in 2019 before they moved on to their next collaboration. Free Diamond and Sapphire code, this is also pretty self-explanatory. There was actual codes for free diamonds and sapphires. This was usually the 12 code you would see back in the day. This came from an Animal Jam guidebook and then was spread on the internet after a while. I think you got 1 diamond for receiving it, and it was like 25 sapphires, if I recall correctly, if you redeemed it on Animal Jam Mobile. But that code has been long since discontinued and doesn't work anymore. But there's also been a lot of scams on the internet for promising free diamonds and sapphire codes, which kind of falls in the same hacking and scamming method free membership codes fall into. Next here is Scully's. This was the very first tail item in the game. This was actually released all the way back in the beta days of the game, however was removed before official launch because it looked inappropriate on pandas. Scully's then showed up a few times over the years. One time it got into the game again by calling up Animal Jam HQ for items, and it was also shown off a bunch of time by hackers using third-party programs. One hacker specifically put enough public pressure on Animal Jam that they ended up just releasing it after changing its appearance on a number of animals, so it didn't look inappropriate, but now it's in the game nowadays for everybody to enjoy, so I guess it was a win-win situation for the players. Cammy Carver was a daughter of Pat Carver, who was a Animal Jam developer in the early years of the game, but this is where the Cammy's frog item comes from. The Cammy frog is an actual thing that was Cammy's plush toy named Froggy, but it was added to the game after Cammy's battle with leukemia, which he ended up surviving, thankfully enough. But yeah, they added the Cammy frog item, I guess, as a reference to her and also to support her battle with leukemia at the time. Next here we have cross trading. This is referring to a bunch of things. Obviously there's cross trading between Animal Jam Classic and the mobile version of the game. There's no way to officially trade between the two, so you just kind of have to trust one another that you're gonna fulfill the trades if you are cross trading. But some people also cross trade to other games. In the early years of Animal Jam, a lot of people cross traded from Chicken Smoothie, which is still up and running nowadays. They also cross traded to Transfer Mice, which is also still up and running. And I've even seen some people cross trade to stuff like Roblox, so I guess if there's a market for it, people are gonna, you know, take advantage of it. Next here is something I refer to as SB files in the last version of the Iceberg, but this was when Animal Jam was live streaming and accidentally leaked their files on stream, where one of them was named inappropriately. I don't swear on this channel, but you can kind of piece together from this screenshot on what the S stands for and what the B stands for. To this day, I have no idea why they named the files like this. Obviously, they didn't intend anybody to see it, but pretty ridiculous and one of the stupidest controversies in Animal Jam history. Unreleased items are just items that haven't been made officially obtainable in any means, whether it be stores, codes, etc. There used to be a lot of these items that Animal Jam just had stored away in the files that you weren't able to get access to, but they've actually ended up released a lot of these over the last few years. There's probably only about a handful of clothing and den items that Animal Jam still hasn't done anything with, and there's probably a lot of those that probably will never get released just because I think they're inappropriate. Stuff like heavy shackles and the heavy chain items, those probably will never come out, as well as like the race car bed and the princess bed. Although those items have been in the game before, they were deleted and I don't think will ever be officially released just because players will be inappropriate with them. Next here is secret colors. There's actually a numerous amount of secret colors both on Classic and Animal Jam Mobile. For Classic, the very original secret color was this icy blue color, and then it was the magenta color, which is just the base variant of everything on the game. There's also some unreleased colors that you can get by accessing the default colors on animals. When you make a new animal, sometimes there is a color that it is set as that isn't available on the palette. These are referred to as secret colors, where you can move these colors onto different animals through the use of glitches. On Animal Jam Mobile, it's a lot easier to do. There's like a lot of little combinations you can do in order to unlock some secret colors for use, if that makes sense. And I believe the color coordinator feature also gives access to some colors that weren't available on the color wheel. But moving back to Classic, there's actually a lot of unreleased colors in the game. There's 255 to be exact, and there is some that aren't available even through the use of glitches like I just said, and usually are only available if you use hacking software to set your color as that, which is where you see a lot of these neon bright colors a lot of the time if you've ever seen them on game. Those aren't something you can legitimately obtain or set your animal as. Now, different versions I mean here are just different servers for the game depending on what language your account is set into. But for Animal Jam Classic and Animal Jam Mobile, there's different servers set for each language. There's English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, Dutch, and then also Russian exclusively to Animal Jam Mobile. Animal Jam Classic is not supported in Russian whatsoever. And I believe Animal Jam Mobile also has Arabic. I'm pretty sure I remember reading that somewhere. However, a lot of the servers I just listed go through a lot of issues compared to the normal English American servers. A lot of players are just straight up not able to log in at times. Kind of similar to the something went wrong error, but 10 times fold, pretty much. A lot of players have to end up using VPNs sometimes to access Animal Jam straight up, or they just have to switch their account language to English so they can play the game. It's really weird, but hopefully Animal Jam finds out what's going on there, because that issue has been happening for about a year or two 2 now. Now the Chamber of Secrets here is a secret room that's only accessible through a certain part of the map after lighting up candles in the Chamber of Knowledge. I presume this is just a random Easter egg Animal Jam threw in that they didn't really expect players to find, maybe. Albeit it does seem to be intentional anyway. Once you actually get to the Chamber of Secrets, it is located under the Chamber of Knowledge. There is a hidden store available there that sells, I believe, 6 den items that you can pick up on. Not too many people visit this, obviously, because it's hard to get to in the first place, but it's just a cool little Easter egg Animal Jam has placed in on the game. And the last one here for this section is the non-member member animal glitch. This is a glitch you can pull off on the game through the use of 2 accounts. If you trade yourself while you turn non-member and you're still a member animal, if you trade yourself a masterpiece, go to the den of the masterpiece artist, you're able to click the change animal inventory and then click out of it to pretty much get away the prompt of Animal Jam making you select 2 non-member animals. So you can keep playing as a member animal as a non-member that isn't usually available to you. There's been numerous ways to do this over the years, but this is the finalized way to do it now. Animal Jam patched a lot of the older versions on how to do it, unfortunately, but you also have to do this glitch every time you log in, so it is kind of a pain, but it is still a cool glitch nonetheless. One of my favorite glitches in the game. Now, starting us off on the third section, we have beta accounts. These were accounts that were made in the beta testing period of the game. However, when the beta testing period ended on the game, some items were made member only since membership was introduced after the game launched. However, these items during the beta testing period were just non-member because there was no membership. However, if these accounts were wearing these items, they became non-members wearing member items, which produced a lot of cool results for some of these accounts because there would be non-members wearing stuff like gazelle horns and top hats, and even an account wearing a beta hood like my one. Yep, that's my most proud accomplishment on this game. 991 was the most controversial artist on the game. He would make masterpieces. You've probably seen some of them, or at least seen the style of it, and you've probably also heard of the guy, but not for the right reasons. He made a lot of inappropriate looking masterpieces, to say the least, and there was also allegations of him being a pedophile and a predator on the game, which had a lot of credible sources to them. He had his username changed in, I think, 2021 to Agrix before his account disappeared again, and he hasn't really been seen around the game since, so he's presumably quit, and thankfully so if he has. Black holes is referring to a glitch that happens with den items when you place a bunch of the same den item on top of each other. Eventually, after you place enough of them, a big black square will appear behind them. This was in the game for quite some time before it was removed. However, I'm pretty sure it was only removed because people started scamming with this, promising people a glitched black square item if they traded for one of the items they had stacked in their den. Zero was a banned Animal Jam account that people started to spread a lot of rumors about around 2017, I believe it was. The only way you could get to Zero's den was by visiting a few different accounts titled 1 to 9, I believe, which had portals in their den leading to Zero's den. People started the rumor that Zero was dead purely because of the way their den items was set out, which had a tombstone next to a black koala plushie, which resembled their animal, which is just a black and white koala. A lot of the rumors surrounding this was if you spent too long in Zero's den, your game would get so laggy to a point where it would start to crash, or even some people saying if you spent too long in there, your account would either get hacked or you would get permanently banned from the game. A lot of these creepypasta rumors, I guess if you want to call them, were popularized by the Animal Jam YouTuber Julian too. However, were debunked pretty soon after his video when Zero themselves made a video talking about why they were actually banned from the game. So yeah, no one actually died or anything like that, and fun fact, I was actually friends with Zero way back in the day in like 2014, which was kind of surreal to see all this unfold way back in the day. Animal Jam 2, I guess this is like a concept game people thought was going to happen after the old CEO Clark Stacy came out and said Animal Jam Classic would be receiving updates again after years of players wanting Animal Jam Classic to be updated. Animal Jam 2 wasn't actually a thing that was going to happen. What he was really discussing was just a rewritten version of Animal Jam in a different language aside from Flash, so they could actually properly update Animal Jam again, which unfortunately never ended up happening, but we'll get onto that a bit later in the iceberg. Next here is color glowing hacks. This is usually when you cover your animal in mud and use a program to alter the mud color into a different color. A lot of people use third-party programs to achieve this, of course. You'll even see the bots raiding the game doing this as well. But a lot of hackers used to do this way back in like 2016, I think is when it started, to try to create drama and panic amongst players. But in all reality, these are just harmless really. If any harm could be brought, is just to your eyes, if anything. Hacked masterpieces is referring to images that aren't made in Animal Jam's art studio imported into the art studio. Animal Jam uses their own specialized art file you can save to your computer if you want to work on a masterpiece later on. So it didn't take long for people to reverse engineer that file and find a way to convert actual images into that art file. This produced people just straight up putting images in the art studio and managing to get them approved as masterpieces. It also produced a lot of inappropriate masterpieces or just straight up AI generated art in the game as of recent. Next here we have item spawning. This is different from the generating item section I had because item spawning actually was in the game. It's a little different from how you might think. People weren't just able to put in like a code or something and then just generate any item they want. A lot of item spawning, from what I know of anyway, is just like old shop lists that were left over in the files people managed to hack their way into and just buy items like party hats and phantom rugs and tiki masks and headdresses, stuff like that. This happened in about 2017 or 2018, and I only remember that one time happening of it. In hindsight, this might be a little lower on the iceberg than anticipated, but a lot more people know about these items now. But the extreme beta item set anyway, this is a set of 5 items, albeit one of the items is not as rare as it used to be. But in order of rarity, it goes from beta creature mask to the pearly tiara to the beta eye to the milky tiara, then the beta elf helmet. These are either all beta variants or just removed variants from certain items in the game that were either given out by Animal Jam or just straight up available in stores at some points. Very few of these exist in the game, thus why they are some of the rarest items in the entire game. As I referenced earlier on, Feral did indeed end up shutting down in early 2022, and that's after months of the servers being down in late 2021. This decision by Wildworks was made in hopes to move to a different game known as Cinder, where it would take Feral's assets and be used for an NFT game, which I'm sure some of you have probably heard about that. That is definitely what influenced it, but I'd be lying if there wasn't other factors into it. Feral just wasn't as successful as they would hoped it to be. A lot of players lost interest in it. It wasn't as generating as much revenue as they hoped it for, and they just straight up lost a lot of money when making Feral. So they just kind of decided to do what seemed logical at the time to them. And then next, it's only fitting we talk about Cinder and the NFT stuff. But this game was just more of a skimmed down version of Feral. You could only play as one character, and that's if you bought the NFT, so you pretty much had to buy your way into the game. A lot less to do in the game. It was essentially just a social hub game. You couldn't really do anything that you would be able to do in Feral. But unsurprisingly, this was met with great distaste from every side of the community. And about a year or two later, Wildworks would move Cinder off to a different company entirely. LolKing Century 1 was one of the earliest AJ hackers, albeit he didn't really do a whole lot except change his animal name to an inappropriate phrase of words, I guess is the best way to say it. Yeah, he just set his animal name to, we'll just say NFU, okay? Because I can't say one of the words, that's for damn sure, but I also don't swear on the channel, so again, you're gonna have to use your thinking cap on what this actually is. It's never been confirmed on who actually was LolKing Century 1, and it's never been, at least these years later, figured out on how this person actually pulled off what they did. But Animal Jam found out about this pretty quickly and took action pretty swiftly as well. The Animal Jam box was a quarterly subscription box produced by Animal Jam in collaboration with Culturefly. They usually arrived at customers' doors every 3 months with a bunch of Animal Jam themed merchandise alongside a code to redeem in-game, where you see a lot of items like shark tails or even some pets like galactic flies and magenta seals. This ran about for 4 years until they discontinued it. The text of hashtag 6389 has shown up a lot of times over the years, whether it be in the user interface of the game or in item names. It's usually shown up because assets aren't loading properly or data isn't attached to a certain item. For example, if an item name isn't usually attached, sometimes this will pop up and usually is commonly seen with items. I think the most famous example of this was when the gingerbread mask came out. It was named hashtag 6389 for about a month until it was changed to the actual item's name. And there's been various other glitch items over the years that have had this text string as their name as well. And if it isn't hashtag 6389, it's usually hashtag and a few other numbers numbers, but this has also happened sometimes with user interface strings in the game as well. Kind of similar to null. If a player name isn't loading properly or a text on some kind of pop-up around the game isn't loading properly, it will default to this just as like a failsafe type of thing. The only other example I can think of right now is #7335, I'm pretty sure, which usually showed up on trades when the rare tag wasn't loading properly. Now, shaman sightings is mainly referring to alpha sightings in game, because early on in the game, alphas were just referred to as shamans. But the earliest sighting of it is obviously this screenshot here with Snowy Claw with Graham appearing in game. Apparently the model for this was extremely buggy and glitchy, so it's no wonder that this was never used again. However, the only other alpha model in the game that was in this style was Liza, and all these years later, they actually permanently removed these models from the files, so they were never found. However, I guess if we're just talking about alpha appearances in game, of course there's a bunch of alpha appearances in the tutorials of the game, as well as in the adventures on Animal Jam Classic, and then on Animal Jam Mobile they play a lot more of a prominent role, showing up all over the game. Even in Halloween events that's happening as I'm recording right now, all of the alphas are sitting at the top of Jamaa Township, but they usually show up all around Jamaa throughout the year anyway. Clark Stacy, I'm sure a lot of you probably know who this is. This was the ex-CEO of the game, but he played quite a big role in the game when he was the CEO. I think from 2010 all the way to 2023, he was the CEO of the game before he stepped down. From what I know, he no longer is a part of WildWorks at any form, so it was quite an end of an era, if you will, but you probably heard a lot of people making jokes about this guy being like Mr. Animal Jam type of thing way back in the day. Yeah, he was just the CEO of the company behind Animal Jam. Next here we have inappropriate masterpieces. I guess this could tie into hacked masterpieces since a lot of those end up being inappropriate, but I guess it could also tie into Haya91 because he also made an abundance of inappropriate masterpieces, but you know, just pick and choose, I guess. Just masterpieces that definitely should not be in a kid's game, definitely appearing in a kid's game, kind of questioning how they even got past the moderation filters. Thankfully, Animal Jam is kind of cracking down on a lot of these nowadays, to the point of if you have an inappropriate masterpiece and it's reported, it will end up being just a black square at some point, since Animal Jam just removes the art entirely from the game. Now, I think I referenced this earlier on in the video, but calling Animal Jam for items was a very prevalent thing in 2013. A lot of players, when they discovered Animal Jam had a support line, ended up calling them asking for items that they never ended up having. They usually lied about this, saying they got scammed or hacked out of the things, and I guess the normal protocol back then was just to restore the items no matter what, without actually double checking if the player actually had them. But this opened a realm of possibilities for players, not only getting items that they only dreamed of having, some people actually just got items that were straight up unreleased, or unreleased variants of certain items too. But this was so badly abused to the point where Animal Jam shut down their phone line entirely, moving to a private number that I'm pretty sure you could only get to is if your ticket that you create through Animal Jam's support desk now is so hard for them to work out through the ticket that they offer you to call them on the private line, which I don't think they even do nowadays, actually. Either way, you can't call them anymore, and you can't find their phone number anymore because of stuff like this. In mid-2015, Animal Jam actually showed up on the WLFA news report in a segment where a parent complained to the news station that Animal Jam was too inappropriate for children. This segment mainly focused on how Animal Jam could potentially be misused by older players or have events happening in the game that could potentially be inappropriate, but it also featured a video made by Lilac Petal featuring Apari, two prominent Animal Jam YouTubers at the time, weirdly enough, in the segment. But this seemed to be the very first time Animal Jam was ever on the news, and might be the only time actually Animal Jam was on some kind of news report station. Back when the diamond shop was first introduced, there was a common myth: if you dressed up all white with no items on your animal and danced on one of the diamonds on the floor in the diamond shop, you would have a chance to get free diamonds. Obviously this was not a thing that was implemented in the game, it was just a giant hoax, but it went on for a few years before people started to realize, yeah, this isn't a thing that's in the game. The News Crew was a program that Animal Jam posted over on their blog, the Daily Explorer, that gave out topics for players to write about every month or so. And if they were selected to be a part of the news crew, they would be given a plaque in-game. This golden plaque right here was given out for the very first few years, and then the last 2 years it was available, it was changed to a diamond plaque. And they would also be given a special name tag of a camera icon on their name that displays no matter what. Usually name badges only show up if you're buddies with somebody. However, if you're part of the news crew, this badge will always show up when you have it equipped. But after 2018, the final article was released and it was never hosted again. It's unknown why Animal Jam discontinued it, but the entirety of the Daily Explorer doesn't seem to be upkept anymore outside of just basic Animal Jam news. Treasure Hunts was a feature in Animal Jam Mobile that allowed players to open up chests every day, depending on what animals they had. This usually hosted a numerous amount of prizes, ranging from gems, sapphires, to some rare items even. These would respawn every day, however in 2020 this would be replaced by a normal daily spin instead. Epic plushies were actually, I believe, the very first physical piece of Animal Jam merchandise. This was made in collaboration with Sidekicks. These were just little Animal Jam plushies of various animals in Animal Jam and would come with codes for you to redeem in-game to get the plushies themselves in-game as well. Contest items. This is actually one of the newer things on this iceberg so far. These are special items Animal Jam gives out to players for winning contests, usually hosted on their Instagram, but they also give them to Jambassadors as well, for the Jambassadors to also hold out contests or giveaways for them to give out these items. A lot of these items are usually solid color items in really bright colors, like you can see on screen. Personally, not my cup of tea, but you know what? I collect them anyway, just because I like to have every item. A lot of these are pretty controversial and a lot of the community doesn't like them, but there's a select few that people go head over heels for, so there's something for everybody out there, I guess. Gift card exclusive animals were animals that were only obtained by buying a 3-month membership card, and you'd get them as a bonus for redeeming the code. The very first 3 animals to do this were the lion, the Arctic wolf, as well as the snow leopard, and a year after that, the kangaroo was also an exclusive one in Australia and New Zealand. All of these animals would inevitably be released into the diamond shop for all players to obtain. However, a year after that, they also released the spring bunny initially through membership gift cards, which they also just ended up releasing normally to players later on. Nowadays, Animal Jam just releases animals into stores normally or through actual diamond or sapphire bundles. In 2013, Animal Jam released gazelles into stores, and even just a few months before that, they released them into the Forgotten Desert prize pool as well for people to obtain. But before both of those things happened, they were the quite rare item, to say the least. Some of the variants being the rarest items in the entire game, so it was quite a shock when people saw these in stores, and it was quite a controversial decision to say the least. But Animal Jam has a habit of releasing rare items into stores. Gazelles is probably the biggest offender people remember, but stuff like top hats were also a pretty shocking one as well back in the day. Creepypastas, this is just a broad spectrum, I guess. You know, there's a lot of creepypastas surrounding a game. I've already talked about some in specific, but there's a lot of niche ones that kind of didn't get picked up on like the ones I've already talked about. I figured I would at least talk about creepypastas being a prevalent thing on Animal Jam, especially in the earlier years of the game as a whole anyway. Figured I'd just combine both of these here, but they're pretty self-explanatory. Scamming groups would be just a group of players that would help each other scam other players on the game, and anti-scamming groups would be players trying to prevent scams, making people aware of players that were scamming people. A lot of these used to be pretty prevalent in the earlier mid-years of the game, but not so much anymore. Nowadays, there's just Discord channels making people aware of scammers in various Discord servers. Minnowing is something some people did on the game in order to crash other players on the game. The Shoals of Minnow item was a pretty laggy item that if you traded a bunch of them to a player at once, it would overload the memory of the Animal Jam desktop app and crash their game, causing them to reload their game. People would tend to do this to troll and target other players to crash their games, of course. It got so bad to a point where there was people even making bots just specifically to target players to automatically minnow them whenever they logged online. It wasn't until earlier this year Animal Jam Jam actually stepped in and changed how this item was animated so it wouldn't overload their memory of the game anymore. So you couldn't crash people with minnows anymore, but it was definitely a ridiculous thing that had been happening on the game for a good few years. The Spring Bunny glitch is a glitch on the game that allows you to change the color of the Spring Bunny patterns on the game. Usually the patterns are set 8 colors that you can choose from. However, there's glitches that you can use to pretty much change it to any color you want. This was a really gate-kept glitch early on when it was discovered, to the point where people were creating drama over it. But as Animal Jam introduced more patterned animals with special colors on them or special designs on them, this glitch has just expanded even more into those animals as well, producing in some pretty cool results, to say the least. This is probably my favorite glitch next to the non-member animal glitch, that's for sure. Taylor Mall was the lead character designer and artist for Animal Jam. From what I know, he no longer works at WildWorks. However, most if not every iconic Animal Jam art piece was designed and done at his hands. The entire style of the game follows even now was all at his hands, so honestly I don't think Animal Jam would be where it is without him. His art is so iconic though, as I said, and I don't think he gets enough recognition for his work sometimes, so I definitely wanted to mention him somewhere on this iceberg. Animal Jam actually attended VidCon in 2017 and 2018. This is when Animal Jam YouTube was probably at its peak. It's nowhere where it used to be, unfortunately, but Animal Jam themselves had a booth there where they flew out a bunch of the ambassadors at the time to participate in events there. Both years they had the Zyros versus Myra event, as well as the Direwolf versus Sabretooth events, where ambassadors would be set into 2 teams to go up against each other and compete in different challenges and mini games. Mighty Squad was a hacking group in 2013 that took credit for the attack by Wretched Jungle around the same time period of the game. There was no actual proof that they were behind Wretched Jungle, but it was proven that they were just a bunch of kids using voice changers trying to sound intimidating. A lot of the time they just made baseless claims that they were going to be hacking people, using inspect elements to try make it seem like they were on people's accounts, but never actually doing anything to prove that they were real hackers. Animal Jam usually has an item recovery system in place for when players get hacked and it's genuinely not their fault. They'll have their items recovered in this little blue pop-up saying Animal Jam recovered your items for you. This was especially used post 2020 after the database breach, where a lot of players got hacked and it was at the fault of Animal Jam. Originally, the system recovered items by taking the items from the hackers' inventories and moving them back to your inventory like they were originally. However, after the database breach, presumably because of the work overload, they just started spawning items through this system in order to recover to you. However, with this, people started to abuse it. There was ways people found out how to fake being hacked in order to essentially duplicate items through this system, but also with items that were glitched or beta variants of items that didn't have their color IDs stored in the files anywhere, they would be recovered in a pure magenta format, which introduced an abundance more magenta items into the game. Although this was unintentional, Animal Jam didn't do anything about it until a year afterwards, and now it doesn't seem like they recover any items whatsoever, but people abused this pretty heavily and essentially spoofed a lot of items because of this. I think I talked about this earlier on when talking about WildWorks, but the original company name behind Animal Jam was Smart Bomb Interactive before they changed it. There was a lot of references to it around the game, but they've either been removed or changed just to WildWorks references. But I feel like Smart Bomb Interactive's name as a whole gets pretty overshadowed now, which I guess is probably what they want. As I said earlier, I think it was about 3 years into Animal Jam when they rebranded from Smart Bomb Interactive to WildWorks. However, they were a pretty established company before that even. They were mainly focusing on like other kind of console kind of games. I know they made some games like Pac-Man games and also Snoopy games. They, I think, worked with Bandai Namco, which is like another game development company. And I think they also made a B-movie video game, which I've seen some people poke fun about. But, you know, that's just your little piece of history about kind of what games WildWorks was making before they actually landed on gold with Animal Jam. Rares have actually been available in a lot of enterprise pools, even since the launch of the game mode on the game. Off the get-go, they had clothing betas in the Phantom Portal hard mode prize pool. Stuff like worn blankets, pirate swords, and fox hats were available, which was met with great dismay, obviously. And then moving on into the Forgotten Desert, when that launched, it had a completely different prize pool to how it does now. There was a lot of items removed a few months afterwards, but when the Forgotten Desert first released, there was headdresses, there was founders hats, there was tiki masks, spikes, beards, gazelles, amongst dozens of other items I'm not naming, which kind of set everybody ablaze on kind of being confused on what is even worth anything and if these items were any less rare because they are so obtainable now. This was also on the last iceberg, but Animal Jam worth manipulating is something they have legitimately done a good few times. I would even say the contest items is probably the biggest offender of them trying to do that. It's not even accounting from the times they've just put items that were really rare into stores as well. Well, they don't have an exact idea of what is rare. They have a general idea of some items that are rare, and they do try to make that to their advantage, or at least try to dictate it as much as they can sometimes. In 2018, Animal Jam announced that their longtime partnership with National Geographic, since the game launched, would be discontinued. And quickly after that, all the references to Nat Geo was removed from the game. I mean, even Club Geos was removed for quite some time after that. It's unknown why this actually happened. I do believe the CEO talked about it a bit afterwards, but they probably didn't see too much of a point continuing the partnership. And Animal Jam was doing relatively fine without funding, if they were even getting funding from them at that point. In 2016, hackers discovered Speedo Sands and Sandy Shores in the game's files, which were unreleased rooms that showed concept art and the old version of Crystal Sands. They managed to take other players there if other players followed these hackers there, which resulted in a numerous amount of people going to them. After Animal Jam HQ discovered this, they started banning players left and right just for even visiting these. And when I say ban, I mean permanently banned with no avail to get unsuspended or anything. After Animal Jam took care of that, they removed the availability of these rooms in the files entirely. So even if you wanted to now, through the use of third-party tools, you still can't visit these nor take other players there now. Flash trading was a trend that started in about 2012 on the game, where you would trade players your most valuable items as quick as possible and see if they could accept within that time frame. This obviously resulted in a lot of players being scammed, but it was popularized by the Animal Jam YouTuber Julian2 at that time. So a lot of people were trying it out, but a lot of people took advantage of it and scammed a lot of players as well. Animal Jam went as far as even suspending Julian for doing it, even in videos, and suspended other people also doing it. Flash trading would inevitably end up changing the entire trading system, that you have to double confirm whether you want to accept a trade now or not. JamCon was an unofficial convention hosted by Snowy Claw in 2015, and I believe it was Boston, and then in the following year in 2016, she invited a lot of the other Animal Jam YouTubers to also show up in a giant meetup. This was just an Animal Jam meetup essentially, with opportunity for players to meet Animal Jam YouTubers that were pretty big at the time. The 2012 hat was an old Easter egg with the fancy top hat item on the tiger. When you slept, it would show this 2012 3D text effect with a bunch of confetti showing up around it. This was only for the very first New Year's celebration on the game in 2012, because they didn't celebrate New Year's in the 2 years prior to that, and it was the only year they actually had this Easter egg. Kind of weird, but definitely a cool Easter egg. I kind of wish they continued it all these years later, but at least we have some documentation of it. Hacked adventures on the game were just adventures hosted by hackers that would instantly complete once you joined them. This started out with the Phantom Portal, and you might even see it nowadays when you try to join the Phantom Portal on hard mode. Somebody might just be doing this because it is so common on the game now. But it also happens with the Forgotten Desert, where people host these and it will auto-complete them, allowing you to get all 5 prize pools as soon as you join the adventure. Animal Jam tried to combat this by adding a limit on when you can actually collect the items, specifically for the Forgotten Desert, where you can't collect any items before the 13-minute mark, and if you do, you just don't get them in your inventory. But this has had quite detrimental effects on the in-game economy, as you might think, given how easy it is to get items because of this. Bouncing off from the last point, but spikes removed from adventures was as a result from people doing hacked adventures. Mainly the Forgotten Desert, but also Lucky Clovers and Tiki Trouble, which had spike collars in their prize pools, also had these removed because of people exploiting these adventures for these spiked collars. This had a detrimental effect on the worth in the entirety of the game. Everything became inflated, but a few years after Animal Jam removed these spikes from prize pools, everything seems to be a lot lower in worth now. However, it's an even harder climb for players that are starting over to try build worth now, because every item like clothing clothing betas, dem betas, and spike wristbands that remain in these prize pools have gone down in abundance in worth because these hackers just moved on to farming these items and exploiting these items instead of collars from these adventure prize pools. I talked about earlier people calling up Animal Jam for items and sometimes getting unreleased items, but it got so bad to a point where Animal Jam started deleting them off of players' accounts in one whole swoop. Items like Scullies, horse coins, alpha staffs, the race car and princess beds, etc. They all got removed from the game because Animal Jam realized they shouldn't be in the game. All of these items wouldn't end up being released until years later with the exclusion of the bed items. Trust trading was a similar phenomenon to flash trading. It wasn't as popular, but it was definitely still around anyway, to say the least, where this would be where you would trust people with your most valuable items and see if they give them back afterwards as a trust test, which was a guarantee scam for a lot of people. Also, probably a heavy factor on why Animal Jam ended up changing the trading system later on. Emotes in text was a test or a deleted feature in about 2011 or 2012 on the game, where the little emoticons you can do in game actually showed up in your text chat as well. If you were to do a smiley face, it would be converted into the normal Animal Jam smiley face. I'm not too sure why they didn't end up going with this. Maybe they thought it looked weird or they couldn't find a perfect way to incorporate it. I'm not too sure. However, there's only very few screenshots of this feature actually being in use before it was actually removed entirely from the game. Club Penguin was a direct competitor for Animal Jam in the early 2010s for the online playground space for kids. Club Penguin would go on to shut down in 2017 to make way for Club Penguin Island, which would also shut down in the following year of 2018, soon after its launch. However, also in the year of 2018, Animal Jam made a promotional code after Club Penguin's shutdown, which gave players a playable penguin, a pet penguin, as well as a various amount of penguin-themed den items as well. These items would also be released in stores later in the month, but Animal Jam did this as a way to give to players that were perhaps migrating from Club Penguin to Animal Jam as a way to welcome them in. A lot of people thought this was funny and thought they were poking fun at Club Penguin at the time, but I mean, I thought it was like a nice gesture for them to do. TPP use on AJ means third-party program use on Animal Jam. There's various amount of third-party programs that exist that actually work with this game. Some even make specialized programs just to exploit Animal Jam, which I'm not going to name because I'm not going to contribute to that problem that is happening on the game. But people use these to alter the game's behavior in various ways, to obviously exploit, do things they shouldn't be doing, that kind of thing. Very, very straightforward. Obviously, all these players are at risk to being banned and probably will be banned because third-party program use on the game is obviously very prohibited. Then lastly for this section, retconned AJ lore. This was also on the previous iceberg, and this is just referring to Animal Jam's lore being retconned, meaning they changed certain details that they had set up previously. And I imagine this was just purely because Animal Jam didn't have its entire lore and story set out from start to finish all the way when the game started, when they started laying the foundation out. So certain details were changed or adapted to. I mean, a good example of this is alphas originally being called shamans. I'm not personally too familiar with AJ lore nowadays, so if you know any examples, make sure to drop it in the comments. I'm sure people would like to read it. So back in around 2016, a bunch of Animal Jam YouTubers got exposed for selling items they were getting in live streams and just getting sent by fans in general on the side for real world money, obviously. Now this is strictly prohibited by Animal Jam, like I said in the start of the iceberg, and this did not bode well with them. The situation got so big that Animal Jam themselves came out making a post about it on their Instagram and was even poking fun at the people involved in some points. While some of these people ended up quitting or changed their ways, most of the YouTubers involved ended up selling items still afterwards anyway and got away with it afterwards somehow, but that's not my place to talk about, I guess. 1231 was one of the glitchiest Animal Jam accounts in Animal Jam history. This account somehow made an animal, which the ID wasn't being occupied by an actual animal, so when they would switch to that animal with essentially no animal attached to the ID, they would just turn invisible. However, as the months went on while this account existed, the animal ID would then be occupied by the llama. But before the llama was released, this account essentially leaked what the llama was going to look like and just ruined the reveal of the llama entirely, which is where you see screenshots like this of the blue llama that's not even centered on the player card properly. Developer rooms on the game have been leaked a few times. Obviously, in the last video, I talked about the debug room, which is just a room for developers to test out certain things in the game. Usually had labels around the map telling them what they were doing. Had a lot of warp points to certain areas around the game as well. But there's a lot of developer rooms titled after certain developers on the game that used maps of areas before they were released, or even dens before when they were released. But there's a lot of unfinished rooms as well for stuff like adventures and other areas that just never made it out to the public of the game. While it's pretty clear cut that most of these were testing rooms and concept arts, some of these just have like genuine questionable reasons on why they may be in the game. The in-game player timer was a removed feature back from 2010 to 2012 when it was removed. This was a timer that allowed parents to set a time limit on how long their children could play Animal Jam for. It's unknown why this was removed, but it's most likely because Animal Jam didn't want to set a limit on kids playing the game. I mean, it was only helpful if these kids played as much as they could for as long as they could. There's actually a glitch on the game that allows you to change the color of any item to any color you choose. If you equip multiple items of the same category at once, after a series of steps and changing the color of your animal, it will equip one of the color IDs on one of the items that it shouldn't usually have. After that, you can cycle through your inventory through different items and essentially mesh color IDs with an item that it shouldn't have. While this glitch is not permanent and usually can only be seen in your inventory, sometimes it does actually glitch on the outside and can be seen by other people. Jenna429 was a non-member account on the game that wore both a headdress and a spike collar as a non-member. People commonly confused it to be a beta account, however it is not a beta account, it's just a glitched account. There's actually a few accounts like this on the game. There's another account that is also wearing wings and a Viking helmet, I think, as well as spike collar as well. But around 2011 and 2012 on the game, there was a glitch that if you were logged in while you lost your membership, all your items would retain on your animals. Kind of similar to how beta accounts are, but completely different. This glitch was obviously patched, but any accounts that kind of retained these items got to wear them still, similar to beta accounts. While I talked about unreleased achievements earlier when talking about breaking the ice and bridge in the video, there's actually a lot more unreleased achievements in the game. A lot of these seem like they could be purposed in the game and probably have been plans to be added to the game at one point, but weren't for some reason. Some of these achievements also seem like they had stuff intended to add in the future and then scrapped, but left the achievements left over in the files. And some of them just seem like placeholder achievements with assets missing or just straight up not attached at all. But these are totally unobtainable, and the only way to actually get these is by using third-party programs. Back in the day with Best Dressed, there was a common rumor and myth that you could actually hack the items from Best Dressed into your actual inventory. There was a lot of people that made fake videos back then trying to confuse people that it was actually possible, but this was not a actual thing you could do. A lot of people wanted to do this at the time because there was a lot of rares like spikes and gloves in Best Dressed back then, but this was just a pretty big myth in the game. Around the same time period of when YouTubers got banned for selling items, there was also other YouTubers that got banned for duping items. A lot of these people just ended up targeting few of a kind magenta items at the time and just generally super rare items that people would want. I think it was about a week or two after everybody figured out who was duping was when they actually finally got banned, and they were banned with a pretty penny worth of items, to say the least. The invisible letter glitch involved usernames on the game. When making an account, you could use a special character that wasn't supported by the Animal Jam font, meaning it would just show up invisible in the game. A lot of people did this to have just straight up invisible names, or go as far as stealing other people's usernames as well, which, as you could imagine, did not end well. People were taking usernames of banned accounts or even hackers like fman122. It wasn't long before accounts like these were either banned or had their usernames forcibly changed. I mentioned this on the last Iceberg as well, but I figured I'd mention it here again. Ostriches in Animal Jam Classic. There was actually a poll between 3 animals way back in 2016 on what the next few animals were going to be in the game, and all of them were added besides the ostrich. It's unknown why Animal Jam scrapped the ostrich. Maybe they didn't see enough interest in it in terms of the votes. However, ostriches were later added to Animal Jam Mobile a few years later. But all these years later, they still were not added to Animal Jam Classic and most likely never will be. There's actually glitches that allows you to visit animal only parties as different animals entirely. For example, going to the wolf only party as another animal besides a wolf. There's various ways to do this and various different animals you can do it as, but it's not really a glitch you see used a whole lot anymore and is quite old, to be honest. But not many people even go to these parties anymore in the first place. In 2022, Nazara Technologies acquired WildWorks for $13 million. In this acquisition, Nazara pretty much bought out Animal Jam as well as any other games WildWorks was currently working on. This was low-key a lifeline WildWorks desperately needed, especially after the failure of Feral as well as Cinder and the controversies both of which brought to them. Now, this is one of the most recent controversies, but inappropriate penguin outfits. This was started up by TikTok mainly, revisiting Animal Jam again and then using items in-game to make penguins and monkeys as well as some other animals inappropriate. They used a various amount of items, like the beret, the accordion, amongst other ones. There has been several items that have been disabled on the game now because of this, and some items like den items have also been altered and changed because of this as well. In late 2023, the Forgotten Desert randomly disappeared off of Animal Jam Classic and players were not able to play the adventure. Animal Jam later announced on their Instagram that they found an issue with the adventure and needed to disable it for the time being. It wasn't until months later the adventure would be re-implemented into the game with no noticeable changes whatsoever. The reason on why this adventure was temporarily removed was never revealed and probably never will be. There's actually a few instances on the game where rare pets have been spawned in. The first instance was when pet trading was actually added to the game. If you traded a rare pet to another player, they were able to make multiple more for gems. It was about a month or two after this was added, Animal Jam actually removed the feature entirely. Additionally as well, when players get hacked out of rare pets, Animal Jam would sometimes restore a pet code to them instead, where they were able to pretty much make their own custom pets from scratch. So even if they didn't like the pet they got hacked of, they were able to make a new one exactly to their liking. Third, some Animal Jam moderators just straight up spawned unobtainable pets. Some of these that would end up coming out later on, but some of them that are still unobtainable to this day, like non-member rare fennec foxes, as well as golden armadillos, both of which have only been obtained in the game through the use of moderators spawning them in. Animal Jam surprisingly left a lot of unfinished adventures in the game over the years. I think the very first example of this happening was soon after the Forgotten Desert released. A unfinished and more flat version of it showed up for players to go to. This was just titled simply as Untitled Room, and there's a few other examples of this also happening where flat looking adventures or unfinished adventure maps have shown up titled Untitled Room as well. But another example of this happening in a seasonal adventure for Bitter Sweets, when that adventure first came out, it just showed up as TBA with a bunch of pets as the party banner. And when you went to it, it was a very unfinished map and it followed more of a style of the Forgotten Desert where you're collecting gems instead of actually just attacking phantoms and collecting sweets instead. Nothing in this adventure was even interactable. Sometimes you just randomly got a gem and the prize pool was very limited, but this was only this way for a few hours before it was fixed. And obviously every other time this kind of thing has happened on the game, Animal Jam has made sure to hop right on it because obviously they don't intend for people to see unfinished maps or concept maps in the game. The alpha stage testing footage for Animal Jam Play Wild was about 50 seconds long, and this was most likely shown to investors of the company as a kind of early build of what they were going for Animal Jam Mobile. Obviously the game took a more liking of Animal Jam Classic than of what Animal Jam Play Wild ended up being. It's still cool to see Animal Jam in this state, and I kind of wish we got to see more of the early concepts they were working on for both games. In 2018, WildWorks fulfilled a player's make-a-wish by adding a pet bear into the game named after them. The bear was called Pet Megan's Bear after Megan, who was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 2017. The bear was only sold for a limited time before it was taken out of stores, but all these years later, it seems to be quite the popular pet and even has some rarity to it. Then lastly for this section, the lines of power. These are glowing lines that usually show up around the game. It's more like tied to the lore side of the game, from what I know. There was some rumors that this was planned since the beta, but I don't think that's entirely true. There might have been some lines that were left over in the files early on in the game's life, so they might have had early plans to incorporate these, but I don't think they entirely knew what they were going to do with them yet. These usually show up in adventures, but they have actually shown up recently on Jamal Township back in 2023 when they actually returned Club Geos and altered the way Jamal Township was laid out entirely. There's actually been a surprising amount of Animal Jam YouTubers that have tried to pursue rap careers after quitting Animal Jam YouTube. I think the most two famous examples of this was with Apari and Scorm. There was also a few other ones, but they weren't as big as Apari and Scorm, so I'm not going to mention them. As you might guess, a lot of the people that ended up listening to their music after this were just Animal Jam players because they would try to promote it on their Animal Jam platforms and was just generally unsuccessful with actually pursuing rap careers. Not only that, but the music just wasn't that great and just led to people making fun of them. Tagwa Sunshine was the very first Animal Jam YouTuber, as they were the very first person to ever upload an Animal Jam video onto YouTube. They uploaded a website tour going through Jamal and everything you could do in Animal Jam during 2010 when the game was still in its beta testing period, and the video kind of serves as a time capsule because it's the highest quality footage we have of Animal Jam during its beta testing period of the game. In 2016, the French Daily Explorer distributed a number of unreleased items as contest prizes for jammers, unknowing that the items were actually unreleased. What these unreleased items actually served for were for future promotional items Animal Jam was working on and were going to be used in redeemable codes. However, this was probably a very large miscommunication between Animal Jam and the outsourced workers they used for the French Daily Explorer. These years later, Animal Jam has re-released a lot of these items that were accidentally released through the French Daily Explorer. However, some of them do still exist in the game nowadays and have a rare tag on them. While I talked about some specific collaborations Animal Jam had earlier on in the Iceberg, there's been a lot more that I figured I'd just combine into one broad thing. For example, one of the most recent Animal Jam collaborations was with Cool Math Games back in 2023, where they promoted each other, and Animal Jam even had a free code anybody could redeem for some Cool Math themed den items in game. There's been a lot of collaborations like that over the years, as well as some educational side things with WeForest. I know there was a lot of incorporation in that on Animal Jam and Animal Jam Mobile. Tag with Ryan was another mobile app developed by Wildworks that wasn't related to Animal Jam at all, but if you remember me mentioning Dash Tag earlier on in the video, it was essentially a cloned version of that. However, all of the assets and models were swapped out with characters and assets associated with Ryan's Toy Review, I'm pretty sure, who was a kids toys reviewer YouTuber. I'm not too sure to this day if Wildworks was just trying to cut costs or if the team behind Ryan's Toy Review specifically asked them to clone Dash Tag because they liked the premise or what, but it's essentially the same app and the same concept as Dash Tag was. Worm was a very popular Animal Jam YouTuber in the mid-2010s, and I've mentioned him a few times already with some controversies on the game, like him selling items, and he also turned into a rapper after he stopped making videos. However, there is a lot of things that I haven't mentioned about Scorm that he's been exposed for over the years. This guy was a groomer and a pedophile, and he's not somebody you should support, and every time he has tried to come back to the game, he has been chased out every single time. There's plenty of videos on YouTube, including on my channel, regarding the things he's done if you want to check out more on why he is such a terrible person. Julian2 is another Animal Jam YouTuber that was super popular back in the day. In fact, he was one of the very first Animal Jam YouTubers to explode in popularity. When the Jambassador program first started, he was invited to be a part of it. However, he was removed shortly after due to posting a video that Animal Jam found quite inappropriate. I think in the video he was following some wiki guides that players have made over the years, and in this video he ended up positioning den items that made it look inappropriate, as well as just talking about inappropriate things that weren't very fit for a video made for kids. There was also a few other allegations of him having inappropriate conversations with fans. However, nothing concrete ever seemingly came from that. Now, I talked about invisible letters being used to steal usernames earlier on, but some people use those invisible letters to make inappropriate usernames on the game. It's just straight up putting words that should never be in usernames on the game. I'm talking like slurs, curse words, and just inappropriate phrases. And there is actually some times where people have exploited the filtration system on the game to get certain words bypassed and approved on the game for their usernames as well. While it's only happened a few times, it's definitely not something that obviously should be allowed on the game. There's actually been a few times where sapphires, the premium currency on Animal Jam Mobile, have been hacked in mass. The very first time this was happening was through a tool that would auto-complete all of the minigame rewards on a brand new account, and then transfer these sapphires over to another account through the use of my shops. This would be done to rack up hundreds of thousands, if not millions of sapphires by hackers. There was also a time where people were able to bypass the transaction screen when buying things that costed money in game, like sapphires, and were able to just rack up millions of sapphires. There was even a player that managed to do this that racked up over 1 billion sapphires because of it. Obviously, every player that ends up doing this ended up getting banned. However, it did have quite a detrimental effect on people trying to trade or sell items for sapphires. There's actually been a few times where players have been able to swear in game, once at the fault of Animal Jam HQ, and second at the fault of hackers just using exploits. In 2014, Animal Jam's filter system wasn't working correctly and allowed players to actually swear in the game and use other inappropriate phrases. Not every swear word or slur or anything like that was able to be said. However, there was certain words that just weren't getting picked up on their filters for some reason. After Animal Jam fixed this, they actually did go back and see all the players taking advantage of this and ended up suspending those players. Then second, when hackers managed to bypass the chat filter system or just use other exploits to actually say slurs in game and other swear words. This has happened a few times, not a numerous amount of times, but every time it does happen, it is not a savory result, to say the least. There's some glitch items in Animal Jam Play Wild that are red, green, and blue colored. I don't see a whole lot of people talk about them, and they're probably talked about a lot less now that you can craft items in pretty much any color you want if you have the materials for it. However, think of these like magenta items. I imagine the red, green, and blue colors is like the base variant for every item in Animal Jam Mobile. It's unknown how a lot of these got into the game. However, I talked to one person that had a bunch of them and they said they got it from a mod account, so that's most likely how a lot of them got into the game. But otherwise, it's probably just, you know, Animal Jam recovering items and accidentally messing up along the way as well. Back in 2012, this screenshot of a player named Rarest Girl surfaced on the internet of them wearing a full magenta headdress. This was the very first time we ever saw a full magenta item in the game, and a lot of people were obviously curious about it. And as the years went on, people just got even more and more curious with the ever-growing popularity of both headdresses and magenta items on the game. However, this wasn't actually a real item. You see, I mentioned earlier with items being able to be changed colors in the inventory, sometimes outside of the inventory when you're wearing multiple of one item on your head. And this is the case of what happened with Rarest Girl here, as the account Rarest Girl was actually hacked after the database breach in 2020, and it was found that there was not even one single headdress on the account, and it hadn't been logged into in over 10 years before that. In August of 2021, a known hacking group named Aster Squad managed to hack the game and pretty much take any Animal Jam account they wanted. How the hack worked was if they knew any username, they were able to take the account and put it on their dashboard and essentially grant themselves access to these accounts since they could reset the passwords of them. A few hours after exploiting with this, Animal Jam did discover this and ended up banning all of the accounts affected temporarily as a precautionary method. While this hack will only lasted about a day before Animal Jam found the vulnerability and patched it out, there were still numerous accounts affected by this, including some of the rarest players and the most well-known players in the game. There's a feature on Animal Jam that you can like a masterpiece. However, in about 2022, it was discovered that you could exploit this to bot the likes on masterpieces. As a result, a lot of masterpieces on games instantly grown to millions of likes through the use of this exploit. As it stands now, masterpiece likes do not work on the game whatsoever, and you can't leave likes on masterpieces anymore. However, it's unknown if that is the root cause of why Animal Jam disabled masterpiece likes. I know I touched on Russian and Arabic Animal Jam servers earlier on, but something I did not mention about these is they are totally isolated from every other server in the game, meaning you can't look up players that are on Russian servers and vice versa. On Russian servers, you can't search up players that are on English or Spanish or French, etc. servers either. The same thing with Arabic servers, of course. However, if your account is set to these servers, you have to manually contact Animal Jam support to change it over to another server, unlike how you usually can change over your language yourself in the parent dashboard settings. There's been a few names that have been removed from the animal name combination wheel on the game, and they've been removing some of these as early as the beta testing period on the game. All of the names you see on screen right now were removed for various reasons. Some of them seem like obvious picks on why they would remove them, and some of them it's a little questionable on why they removed them, like Monster, for example. There's also some names that were removed just because with combination of other names spelled out inappropriate phrases. There's another glitch on the game that allows you to be an ocean animal on the land. You can actually do this through the use of something called room desync, where you'll be appearing appearing on an ocean area in the game on your screen. However, on the server side and for everybody else, you'll be appearing on a certain land, depending on how you pull off this glitch. There's been various ways on how to do this over the years, however, it's not really too common on the game anymore. Jam Holiday gift calendar used to be an annual gift calendar that showed up during Christmas on the game. It would give players a free item, diamond, or masterpiece token every day they've logged in, usually being clothing items and den items as well. However, this was removed in 2023 with the replacement of the Jam Holiday gift stand, which is just a lamppost that contained a store around the game that cycled through items every single day, kind of similar to how the gift calendar does. While Animal Jam themselves never outright said why they changed and removed the Jam Holiday gift calendar, it most likely was because the calendar was broken, not giving the 8th variant of clothing items, leaving the 8th variant to be technically unreleased and only being obtained by hackers and exploits, and den items only gave the base variant of items and not any other variants the den items might have, also leaving a lot of them to be unreleased variants. In 2013, it was found that a lot of players were able to buddy themselves on the game. It's unknown how this started, and it was presumably at the era of Animal Jam, given that a lot of people didn't do anything to pull off something like this. However, if you were buddied with yourself and you had yourself on your buddy list, you're actually able to open your player card, which is not something you can actually do on the game. With opening your player card, you could actually report yourself, block yourself, and even jamagram yourself, and it would actually go through, meaning you could also gift yourself. This wouldn't duplicate items or anything, it would just put them in a jamagram gift, but it was still very weird to happen on the game, and it was very buggy around that time period on the game anyway. Animal Jam Mobile, when just called Animal Jam Play Wild, a year after it launched on Steam, became the worst rated game on Steam at the time in 2018. Now, this wasn't because Animal Jam Mobile was bad or anything, but this was actually at the fate of the Quackity raid that happened on the game. A lot of people think he only rated Classic, however, there was a segment in his stream where he tried to invade the 3D mobile counterpart as well, after figuring out it was on Steam. But because of this, a lot of Quackity viewers, they just played the game for the minimum time they could leave a review and negatively reviewed it, making it the worst negatively reviewed game on Steam at the time. And it remained this way for about a year until another game surpassed it. I talked about Astro Squad earlier on in the August 2021 hack, however this group started an entire year prior in early 2020. It initially started out using phishing link hacks, sending them around in the community to cookie log people and hack their accounts that way. However, in late 2020, they actually started the very first bot raid on the game, which was something that had never been done or seen before on Animal Jam Classic. They continued to do this amongst cracking accounts, hacking Lucky Clovers for spikes, as well as upping their bot raids to eventually crash the game at several points throughout 2021 until they landed with the August 2021 hack, which after they disbanded the group for good. There's actually a lot of Animal Jam themed parodies made for a lot of popular songs back in the day. Actually, a lot of the Animal Jam YouTubers I talked about turning into rappers started out making these, so maybe that was the pipeline that started it all. But there was a few popular ones, like some for Katy Perry songs.
I kissed a party and I liked it. The taste of his beard on my lips. I kissed a porridge to try it.
Amongst a lot of rap songs as well, made by the previous mentioned Animal Jam YouTubers.
I learned the game from Michael Wolf, he was the first to hack me. Hack to hack for the betas that didn't get accepted. Hack to hack like he's acting like a wannabe 7.
That a lot of people remember. Looking back on them, they are very cringe, but they are also pretty funny because why are you rapping about Animal Jam of all things? There's a feature on Animal Jam Mobile called Pack Run where you run around a map and collect as much points as you possibly can and rally it up with your other pack members. These scores would be set on a leaderboard where you will compete with other packs to get to the #1 spot. However, there were some packs that manipulated their way to the top by either being owned by hackers that would hack these pack runs to create absurdly high scores, or there was some packs that would implore hackers to join their packs to also manipulate their way to the top. A lot of these packs have either been deleted or banned from the game because of this. However, there was some that were left in the game for quite a concerning amount of time before being detected that there was hackers in their packs. There was a glitch in 2021 where if you unbuddied people as fast as possible, your account would get permanently banned from the game because because of API violations. This was most likely done because Animal Jam was trying to find ways to counteract bot attacks on the game. However, this was swiftly undone because a lot of players were unintentionally getting banned because they were doing things too quickly on the game. On Animal Jam Classic, there's a way to actually boost your level all the way to level 30, the maximum level, without having to do anything. In the Grayley's Inferno adventure, on the light switching section of the adventure, if you do a specific pattern and continuously click to rotate the light over and over, it will perpetually give you experience points, boosting your level with just having to click. It's unknown why this glitch actually happens, but you can do this to get to level 30 without having to do anything. In early 2015, there was a video posted on the Animal Jam YouTuber Apari's YouTube account of him reading hate comments he received. In this video, there was another Animal Jam YouTuber at the time named Rosie Star that left a comment that Apari fans did not take to a liking. Because of this, Rosie Star received a lot of hate to a point where she posted a video claiming her friend posted it, saying that she had passed away because she took her own life. This thankfully wasn't the case and was a huge controversy at the time, but it did give a lot of people a wake-up call to kind of not witch hunt people instantly in the community. Glassdoor is a website for workers to leave reviews on companies they previously or are currently working at, and WildWorks, the company behind Animal Jam, actually does have a page for their company, which on this has mostly negative reviews from people who previously worked there. While some of these are real and from people that genuinely worked there and had genuine negative experiences while working there, a lot of them are fake and just left by people that want to contribute to WildWorks' reputation being in the gutter. However, when this was discovered, a lot of people obviously left fake reviews, as I said, but it also didn't reflect the best on WildWorks as a whole. There's been a lot of times over the years where developer accounts were found by players and managed to actually hack into them because they had easy passwords to them. This is most likely because a lot of these accounts had throwaway passwords to them that were very easy to get into, whether it be by guessing or cracking into them. Some of these accounts had genuinely rare items on them, but some of them had glitched or unreleased items like one-of-a-kind magenta items left over on them. The reason why these probably had them is just because Animal Jam trying to test things out on the live build of the game. However, there's also been times where a player has managed to hack into the parent dashboard of some of these accounts through other means that I'll get into later on, and also hacked an abundance amount of glitched and unreleased items into the game. Animal Jam took a pretty strict criteria with this in terms of banning players that managed to even get these items, even if they traded for them, and also banned players obviously that hacked into these accounts in the first place. In the mid-2010s, there was a big rumor that Animal Jam actually was taken to court by a parent because their child got hacked or scammed. I kept hearing about this a few times over the years, and every time I did hear about it, I've tried to look up if there is anything supporting these claims, but I think it is just a rumor somebody started. However, it would be kind of funny if Animal Jam actually was taken to court over something like that. Then there's also moderator accounts on the game. These are a little different from developer accounts, I'd argue, because they're actually supposed to be playing the game or at least blending in with the rest of the player base. There's actually a chance you probably seen one of these and didn't even bat an eye because they blended that much in with the player base. They have regular accounts with regular items on them, just with special permissions. However, there has actually been a time where a mod account was discovered and they accidentally leaked an upcoming den way back in 2019. I actually made a video on it back in the time when it did happen, which is the footage you're seeing on screen. However, a lot of the public known mod accounts, especially in 2019, ended up getting banned or disabled because players ended up finding out who they were. In 2022, the ex-CEO Clark Stacy promised Animal Jam Classic would be receiving updates on the game and also receiving an entire rework to the code where they would be able to update the game more easily and more frequently. This is where the idea of Animal Jam 2 came from, that obviously was misconstrued very heavily. However, what he discussed here never actually ended up happening, unfortunately. The whole project of Animal Jam being rewritten has not had any updates or announcements about it since this interview with Clark Stacy, which has led a lot of players to believe that he straight up lied about it or prematurely announced it too soon ahead of time. But this project most likely was either scrapped or was just indefinitely postponed. There's an error that occurs sometimes on the Animal Jam Play Wild desktop version that if the Unity game engine crashes, it will play an ear-piercing sound sometimes. I've had this happen a few times to myself. I'm not too sure if it happens on the mobile version. However, I've only ever experienced on the desktop version, and it kind of sounds something like this. Animal Jam Jr. was a cancelled game that was supposed to be for an even younger audience than Animal Jam Classic already is for. This is supposed to be a learning game about letters, shapes, and numbers, and was seemingly going to be a mobile game. It's unknown why this was cancelled, but there was a lot of concept art that was posted online for this and never went beyond that. Animal Jam Classic actually was going to have a player versus player mode that ended up getting scrapped for some unknown reason. This was actually going to be the original way you could get healing staffs and other alpha staffs in the game, amongst other weapon items. And there was actually PvP arena maps that were also left over in the game at the time. This was only viewed by hackers that managed to get into these rooms. However, after this was discovered, they were removed entirely from the game's code. It's unknown why they never went through with this, but they most likely just went through normal adventures going forward anyway. In about 2018, I think, it was posted on Twitter, of all things, this key art of two snow leopards fighting with each other, and people dubbed them to be a gay couple. I'm not too sure why, but this got so big to a point where some people ended up DMing Animal Jam about it, and the CEO, Clark Stacy, at the time about it, where Animal Jam had a very long written response in regard to it, which was kind of dancing around the idea of them actually being gay but not outright saying no. And I don't remember entirely what the CEO said at the time, but I think he entertained it because, I mean, there's no harm in them actually being gay, right? But this was just like a headcanon people applied to this key art, and I mean, I'm all for it too. I think it's very common knowledge that Nat Geo was a very large part of Animal Jam's success, especially in the earlier years when they were promoting it like mad, like in their magazines as well as on their websites. But specifically on one of their websites, you could actually play a demo version of the minigame Sky High in Animal Jam. However, on Nat Geo's website, this actually took a different styling towards the wolf, and I don't think there was a way to actually fully complete it. At least there is no documentation supporting that you could. However, if you fail in this, it would just pretty much tell you to sign up for Animal Jam and you could play the minigame as well as any other minigames there. This was removed from their website, and I think the only way you can play it now is through the Wayback Machine if you do have a browser that still has Flash enabled on it. WildWorks used to have offices in Utah that actually allowed players to visit and have public tours around the office sometimes. One time while this was happening, one of the kids strayed off the tour group, I guess, and accessed a WildWorks employee's computer and managed to take control over some players' Animal Jam accounts. I'm not too sure how this even happened, but I imagine they managed to open the moderator panel, which seems pretty straightforward in screenshots that have been leaked over the years of it. But the kid that actually hacked Animal Jam essentially targeted a bunch of Animal Jam YouTubers at the time and took the items off of their accounts. But what they also did is left these accounts in a indefinite loading screen whenever they did try to log in, essentially leaving their accounts in a maintenance state. However, the kid was able to access and hack them essentially while this happened. Obviously, this was reversed as soon as it was found out, and some of the players affected even got a bonus few founders hats just for their troubles. Near the end of 2015, when Halloween celebrations ended on the game and Halloween items left stores, specifically ibex horns were rumored to be removed from the game and the stores because of satanic reasons. This was only fueled by the Animal Jam YouTuber Nimachu, which created a fake trade attempt video of him trading a glitched ring for a pair of light pink ibex horns, which set everybody ablaze and over trading for these. Essentially, it was a huge ploy for worth manipulation and scamming on the game. It got so bad to a point where I'm pretty sure Animal Jam themselves had to come out and say they were not removed for this reason and were only removed from stores because of Halloween celebrations ending on the game. The Phantom License was a edit a player made on the game themed around phantoms that showed in the bottom left of the map screen. These two screenshots are the only two screenshots of this because it was not supposed to be an actual land. It was entirely a fan edit, but it did not stop some people from being convinced that Animal Jam was going to be adding a Phantom Wastelands to the game and thought it was an unreleased land. The original playable character pitched for Animal Jam was supposed to be Snoopy before they actually landed on animals. This was revealed in an interview with the ex-CEO of the game that was there since the company started. There's never been any concept art or images on what this might have looked like in the game, or if it was even going to follow the same style Animal Jam ended up in. However, this was just because Smart Bomb Interactive had the game rights from the Peanuts company to produce games for Snoopy for PC and consoles. ArtStation is a website that enables artists to showcase their portfolios for companies looking for artists or designers for games mostly, but also for film and other media as well. However, a bunch of WildWorks artists and designers actually posted a lot of their work over on there. In one portfolio, that's actually how the concept concept of Animal Jam Jr. was discovered. However, there was some other concepts for altered versions of certain lands in the game, like Mount Shavir as well as Serapia Forest, that look different to how they actually do look in game now. But there was also some unreleased areas like a Labo Cavern that were never implemented into the game at all. It's unknown why Animal Jam didn't go with any of these versions, especially why Labo Cavern was never implemented into the game. However, who knows, maybe they'll implement Labo Cavern sometime in the future, since they definitely have the files to do it. For a good few years on the game, it was a rumor that one of the people behind FMAM122, Abracadabra Alakazam, had actually passed away after mysteriously disappearing from the game. In late 2021, this information was discovered after a group of hackers were trying to find F-Man's accounts to try to get some of his items that he was still rumored to have. While I talked about this in my video talking about the truth about FMAM122, I never discussed how he actually died or any documentation showing off supporting what I said, out of respect for his privacy and his family. However, I will say here, this information came from an ex-partner of his who actually attended his wake and his funeral, and isn't a claim I just made lightly. It is unfortunate, especially because he was a legend on this game, but may he rest in peace. Chrisio was the very first Animal Jam account to be ever created. This was made by Chris Johnson, one of the co-founding members of WildWorks, and served as the COO of the game. Judging by the account's den, it seems like they were last active on this account in 2018, which kind of is fitting given that he left the company around that time period on the game. The Animal Jam Outfitters is a website for Animal Jam to sell membership codes as well as other codes for premium currency in the game, and it also served as a website to sell merchandise when Animal Jam did used to sell these. However, in 2020, Astro Squad hacked this website after finding a vulnerability in it and changed the HTML of the page entirely to something they wanted, usually redirecting them to the Astro Squad YouTube channel. Unfortunately, I don't have any documentation of this, so I can't show it on screen. This is most likely because the Astro Squad YouTube channel ended up getting terminated. However, no private information or previous customer information was compromised as a result of this. All they were able to do was just change how the website looked. There's been a few unreleased Animal Jam products that have had samples made for them but haven't actually went into production. Some of these showed up on eBay in around 2021 and were sold to various players of the game that were interested in these. When scratching off the code redemption that comes with this sample toy, it just says the word sample, and when Animal Jam was actually contacted about this previously, they said they couldn't give any items for players that bought these. But there was a few unreleased items that I previously talked about in the French Daily Explorer section of this video that most likely were made for some of these sample builds that never ended up going into production. While Animal Jam has deleted a few unreleased items from players' inventories in the game, they never outright deleted them from the files. However, there has been some unreleased items that players have previewed through the use of third-party programs that Animal Jam has straight up removed from the game entirely. Most notably, the broken gingerbread mask and the wings come to mind. The wings would eventually end up getting added to Animal Jam Mobile as an item. However, they were removed entirely from Classic and aren't even available through the use of third-party programs now. There's been other few items that have been outright removed from the game's code like this, and Animal Jam most likely did this because hackers were peeking in at items that they didn't want to be seen yet. IP bans are the highest tier of punishment on Animal Jam that you can receive. This is usually saved for the most severe cases of people breaking Animal Jam's rules, obviously. In the earlier years of the games, these were very rarely ever given out, usually only to people hacking the games and also just creating a lot of ruckus on the games. It would essentially block them from logging into the game or even accessing the website, usually putting various errors saying they're restricted or bad gateways. Nowadays, people do actually experience IP bans a lot more and it's a lot more familiarized, but a lot of the time they're only temporary IP bans automatically given out if you're trying to log into too many accounts too quickly. More of a failsafe if you're trying to crack accounts essentially. But sometimes if you get too many of these violations, essentially it'll probably just automatically IP ban you. IP bans just aren't as rare anymore, just purely because from what I know, a lot of internet routers don't use static IPs and they use dynamic IPs, meaning your IP refreshes. It all just really depends, I guess. I previously talked about people calling up Animal Jam for items, and that is a form of social engineering. However, it goes a little bit more in depth with that. There's been a few times over the years where people have managed to social engineer Animal Jam support in order to take accounts and move them onto their parent dashboards. A lot of players did this after the database breach happened, which made it an abundance easier for accounts to to get hacked. A lot of people managed to get private information to make it even easier to social engineer at Animal Jam at the time in order to hack accounts. But some players have also managed to find a way to social engineer Animal Jam to get unreleased items back into the game. A lot of these items, notably to be unreleased promo items, were seeped back into the game amongst a few other items that eventually ended up getting released. But because of this, Animal Jam support is even more of a nightmare than it usually was now, and is almost impossible to try to get anything done through them now. No offense, Animal Jam. In 2013, an Animal Jam developer website was hacked into, and a lot of information was leaked out because of this. This was mainly just used by hackers to see unreleased items in the game anyway. A lot of these items ended up being beta testing versions of items like the green top hat and Scully's, but there were some other unreleased and test items that were also previewed because of this as well, like this clock here and this tall Arctic wolf looking statue that eventually got released a few years later. Enchanted Earth was a promo line that Animal Jam was working on with another company that never ended up going into production. I'm not too sure what the promo line was supposed to be, but there was supposed to be some in-game elements incorporated with it. This was most likely an early version of what the patterned animals like the spring bunny ended up being, as there was some remnants left over in the files of unreleased patterns for stuff like the wolf and the bunny most notably that matched the key art for the Enchanted Earth promo line. It's unknown why this got cancelled in the first place, but I hope they actually release this eventually, or at least the unreleased patterns anyway, into the game at some point. When Roblox introduced user-created items, some people actually remade a bunch of Animal Jam items in Roblox. A lot of these most notably being stuff like top hats and headdresses, but there was also some, extreme beta items made, as well as magenta items, which is just so funny to think about. They essentially just made Animal Jam items in Roblox, and it just looked kind of weird. But funnily enough, some of these items are actually worth more on Roblox than they are actually worth on Animal Jam. Figured I'd mention it nonetheless. In 2021, former member of Astro Squad hacked one of the Animal Jam help sites to change a hyperlink to redirect a user to Rick Astley Never Give You Up, though essentially a Rickroll in one of the Animal Jam help sites. This was quickly reverted, but it's still funny that this even happened nonetheless. I already talked about Cinder earlier on in the video, the game that ultimately made Feral shut down with NFTs. I don't think it's too noted about, but this game also was handed over to a different company and also ultimately shut down. The game didn't receive an official announcement of shutdown like Feral did, it just kind of went dark. All communication from the higher ups was cut and the server for the game just ended up going offline. I'm not too well versed in NFTs, I imagine the holders of them can resell them, but what I do know is they're not even worth 1/10 of the price of what a lot of people bought them for when the game actually did launch. Unknown if there was any kind of rug pull of like mass selling of these before the game even shut down, but a lot of people lost a lot of money and were essentially lied to when all of the early promises were made to them when this game did initially launch. There's an Animal Jam commercial that seems to be lost to time, and the only frame left of the commercial is this frame right here. Now, I have kind of somewhat memory of seeing this back in the day, however, there is no video of this on YouTube or even on the entire internet anywhere, and the only thing that is left is this one frame. I've personally tried to look into this, and it's only led to dead ends, whether it be private YouTube videos or dead websites or terminated YouTube channels. So yeah, it does seem to be lost media for Animal Jam, surprisingly enough. I talked about deleted animal names earlier, which were animal names available in the animal name list when you're making your animal, but were removed at a later point. However, there are some animal names that genuinely were not available whatsoever and only available to moderators of the game. From my knowledge, only 2 publicly have ever been seen, one being Smart Fox Support, which was all 3 spaced out, which is a very rare occurrence on the game, and also Infinity Chatbot, both applied to 2 moderator accounts. The first one being, I'm pretty sure, an account named Smart Fox Support, or just Smart Fox, which provided server hosting to Animal Jam. I'm not too sure if they still provide server hosting, but they previously did anyway. And the second one was just a big, long username. It started off with SBI though, which obviously is for Smart Bomb Interactive, so it was probably just a test account of some sort, presumably for chatting maybe, but these were never obtainable by other players or anything like that, and were only ever seen through these accounts. I talked about Animal Jam Jr. being a cancelled game earlier on, but there was actually other few games that were cancelled as well that Animal Jam had planned on making. In a promotional video made by Wildworks, they teased at the idea of a few games, including a VR mode for Animal Jam, which obviously never ended up happening. There was also a game named JamNet they were going to be working on, which wasn't really a game, but it was more of a service related to Animal Jam, where they would pretty much take the whole concept concept and game engine of Animal Jam runs on, and lease it out to other companies if they wanted to make their own kind of online playground, similar to how Animal Jam is operated. All of these things never ended up going through and ended up getting scrapped. There's been a few times on the game where Animal Jam has rolled back accounts to a previous state after changes were made to them. The most recent example of this was in the August 2021 hack, where they just rolled back certain accounts that were affected by this, which did accidentally duplicate a lot of items that were hacked from the accounts originally. However, there's also been times where they did a site-wide rollback all the way back in 2013, which still is unexplained to this day and is largely forgotten about. I figured I'd include this as like a more of a broad scale because this has happened a few times where Jambasters have acted inappropriately. Some of them have shown predatory behavior and have been forcibly stepped down from the program because of it. Some made inappropriate artwork that created a bit of controversy in the community but was looked past, and some of which that were removed from the program because they were acting inappropriately in game. And while these are just 3 examples I'm naming here, there's definitely other examples of some Jambasters just selling items, which is against the Animal Jam rules, or just blatantly talking about people in pretty bad ways in public Discord servers that a lot of the times don't seem to be held responsible. Animal Jam has actually given out cease and desist letters to players that they really don't want on their game. Now, they were pretty justified in doing this because a lot of the players they did send these out to were players that were hacking or exploiting on their games. However, the people that did receive this usually ignored them a lot of the time, and Animal Jam didn't pursue legal action. Not trying to undermine them when I say that, by the way. I don't want to get one of these. But essentially, Animal Jam was just threatening legal action and seeking damages from these players if they did continue to do the things they were doing on the game. Animal Jam was actually planning to make a TV show for the game, and this was first teased in the promotional video for WildWorks when showing off a bunch of things they were planning on doing for Animal Jam, but they did talk about making a TV show all the way back then. From what I know, the last news about this was in 2020 until it actually eventually just ended up being cancelled. I don't know if it was because of the pandemic or just lack of interest, but they cancelled it nonetheless, which is pretty unfortunate. It would have been cool to see what they would have gone for this. This is the last mention of F-Man on this iceberg, but I did talk about earlier with the invisible letter glitch, some people were able to remake the Fman122 username, which technically would be this as well, but there was actually a time on the game when somebody just straight up remade the Fman122 username. This was way back in 2015 when Animal Jam's filter system gave out again, specifically for username filters, and somebody was able to make the Fman username again. This lasted for about a day until the account was banned from the game, but it sure enough did cause panic in the time that it was around and roaming in the game. In 2016, a Washington Post article was created on Animal Jam from the point of view of a parent talking about their daughter having a quite inappropriate experience on the game. This created a lot of controversy back then for parents especially, and is probably what led to a lot of parents outcrying about the game and inappropriate behaviors persisting on the game. But it is the first time a major media company covered Animal Jam in such a fashion. There's an audio file left over in Animal Jam's files that is quite weird sounding. What the audio sounds like is a bunch of Western music, but at the start of the audio, it actually says what we're dealing with is a complete and lack respect for the law, which is actually a clip from the movie Smokey and the Bandit, which I guess is kind of funny because this was found through data mining, so maybe it's Animal Jam trying to poke fun at people that are going through their files. I don't know, but take a quick listen on what it actually sounds like.
What we're dealing with here is a complete lack of respect for the law.
Usually when redeeming codes on the game, you can only redeem it once per account, especially for codes that come with promotional toys. Those are one-time uses. However, there is an exploit on the game that allows you to redeem codes multiple times across accounts. How this exploit works is through the use of a bot that simultaneously redeems the code across multiple accounts, which I believe the limit was 10 to 15 accounts. This is very unknown about because it was very rarely ever done for accounts. However, the times I know of it happening were for pet codes like pet seals and groundhogs, etc. Really extreme, rare pets that are hard to get on the game. So it obviously is not good that these were exploited. I briefly talked about Chris Johnson, one of the previous CEOs of the game, earlier on in the video, but I didn't talk about why he is now a previous CEO rather than the current. In May 2017, a surprise termination of 14 members who have been at WildWorks for a majority of the company's life at that point were surprisingly terminated. I believe Chris Johnson was also affected affected by this as the investors in WildWorks wanted change in the company, but it wasn't just limited to just the investors. From what I know, the actual workforce there as well was split down in two, it seemed like, with conflicting ideas on where they wanted to take the company and where they wanted to take Animal Jam, more importantly, where they would work on things players would actually enjoy or work on things that would make the most profits. But since Chris's departure in 2017, he's not had any involvement in Animal Jam whatsoever, despite being a part owner still, but he has moved on to making different games and founding a new company entirely afterwards. When playing Overflow, if you actually go AFK for a certain amount of time, you'll get a pop-up asking if you're still playing the game and you'll have to hit OK not to get logged out. While this is a pop-up that usually shows up in normal gameplay, the exception with Overflow, it actually plays a bell chime sound effect only in this minigame. Take a listen on what it sounds like. Some players have been doxxed on the game, having their private information exposed to the public. A lot of the time, bad actors will try to seek private information of players they want to leak their information or try to even use it against them to get items or money out of them, which obviously is a very serious and severe thing, especially for something that is supposed to be a kid's game. In Animal Jam's internal files, there's a set series of files that actually shows all the text that shows up all around the game. For example, everything in the Jamal journal that you'll read actually shows up in this one large big file, and there's one for each respective language that the game supports. However, there is one for the Chinese version of the game that never seemed to actually be released. It's unknown if there was ever a build or even a server made for Chinese. However, accessing this Chinese file seems to be largely incomplete, with a lot of English left over in it. It's unknown if Animal Jam was ever going to venture out into making a Chinese version, but it definitely seems that way just from this alone. Sim swapping isn't something you'd actually expect Animal Jam to be associated with. However, there are some players on the game over the years that have actually sim swapped other players in order to get access to their Animal Jam accounts. If you don't know what sim swapping is, you pretty much social engineer a mobile network representative in order to get a SIM card of another phone number that isn't yours. This typically can be used to recover emails that have the phone numbers linked to them, which is what these players ended up doing. This happened a lot back in 2021, where a bunch of accounts started getting hacked from this. Most notably, people like Shop King and Snowy Claw were affected, two of the rarest players in the game. However, it did not stop there, as a lot of moderator accounts were also sim swapped. Since they were attached to emails and parent dashboards of WildWorks employees, some people genuinely sim swapped WildWorks employees' emails in order to get into these accounts. Not only were the previously mentioned players hacked out of every rare they had, a bunch of unreleased and glitch items were also found on these moderator accounts and released out to the public. And Animal Jam most obviously took a harsh stance on this happening, banning any players that even had any items from these accounts and banning any players that even accessed any of these accounts either. In 2016, a unknown hacker made a tool called the Item Decoder that essentially generated images in high quality of every Animal Jam item in the game in any color you can imagine. How it would work, it would essentially render an item in any color ID you desired, and you could essentially make custom items through this. This was shown off in a video made by Julian 2 after the hacker sent him an email for it. However, this video was later removed off of YouTube at requests of Animal Jam themselves. Kind of bouncing off of players being doxxed from the game, there was actually a very few severe cases where players had been swatted over this game. If you don't know what a SWAT is, it's just a false police call to a certain address in order to make the authorities visit the address, usually resulting in SWAT teams or ambulances visiting a house when there's actually nothing going on. This was obviously done by extremely malicious players targeting specific people around the community. It's been a few years since I've seen this or heard this happening, thankfully, but definitely an extremely unacceptable thing to actually happen because of Animal Jam, that is for sure. Here we'll be talking about people stealing Animal Jam promos. When Animal Jam added rare pets to the game, like pet seals, it started a craze they've never seen before. For specifically pet seals, you could only get pet seal codes if you get the Shimmerway toy in an Adopt a Pet toy house. Some people just straight up shoplifted these off of store shelves because they didn't want to pay the $5 for a pet they didn't even know what they were going to get inside. But there was some extreme cases of workers at places like Walmart or Target going in the back of stores and opening stock and just taking out the toys they wanted. This allowed them to get extreme pet codes for free, mind you, and obviously was very illegal. I heard one case of this happening in 2019. I don't think any repercussions was ever brought to the person doing it. However, I know multiple people ended up doing this at places they worked that actually carried Animal Jam promos, and it's just definitely one of those things you did didn't think would happen just because of a kid's game. While this game has seen a lot of hackers over its time, I would say a majority of those hackers just stick to hacking on Animal Jam, whether it be exploiting on the game or hacking other accounts. They really don't do anything illegal outside of the game per se. However, there was one Animal Jam hacker that actually went to prison. Now, as for his crimes on Animal Jam, I guess, this guy took people to unreleased areas in the game, whether it be developer rooms or concept art rooms. He was also one of the players responsible for taking people to the beta version of Crystal Sands I talked about earlier. Additionally, he also took players to out-of-season stores and parties, some of these being parties that aren't going to return to the game, like the Leap Year Party in 2016. He took players to there in 2018 to buy items from those stores, which were actually gaining quite a bit of worth at the time. Otherwise, he was also responsible for exposing a lot of unreleased items in the game that we hadn't seen beforehand. But his crimes on Animal Jam do not end there, because he also committed credit card fraud to buy Animal Jam memberships. I believe he only did this if he needed an account to exploit on that actually required membership, but his credit card fraud did not end just on Animal Jam. He did this outside of Animal Jam as well, purchasing other things, you know, designer clothes, jewelry, phones, all these kind of things, and he eventually got caught. How he was actually doing this was he was using a card swiper that would pretty much copy the details of people's credit cards at his own job. He was pretty much sticking his neck out and pretty much asking to be caught, if you ask me. I did personally know the guy, and last time I heard from him, he actually did go to jail. That was about the end of 2019, and he hasn't been heard from since then, so it's pretty safe to say that he is probably rotting away in a jail cell. A lot of games, companies, and websites have something called a bug bounty program. This pretty much implores players that are exploiting on the game to find some exploits or bugs to report to game companies and websites, and they'll usually receive a financial reward depending on the severity of the bug or exploit. Animal Jam is no exception to this. They also have a bug bounty program, although I'm not too sure if it's active anymore. However, they have hired numerous people that were previously deemed as hackers on their game to enter this program to report bugs and exploits to them. Now, every time I've heard about this, it has not ended well for any person that's entered this. Not because Animal Jam screwed them over or anything, but more so these people that entered these programs were already exploiting on the games anyway, and getting granted a somewhat permission to exploit from the actual game themselves, it ended up getting abused very quickly by these people. Now, Animal Jam is unsurprisingly pretty strict with it and cut off any of those people that tried to abuse it, even if they were genuinely reporting these bugs and exploits, which most of them were. Animal Jam still, from what I know, paid them, but cut them out of the program if they noticed that they were abusing their point in the program. And usually, while Animal Jam pays these people out in money, there's actually been one exception of a time where a player managed to get 2 accounts unbanned from the game as a payment for reporting a vulnerability to Animal Jam. Unsurprisingly, this also did not go well. There was a lot of clause and conditions required into doing this, and they were not fulfilled whatsoever, and just ended up having the accounts banned again. However, they were allowed a 72-hour window to move the items off to different accounts, so I'm not really too sure what Animal Jam was thinking in that case. I can respect Animal Jam imploring people to try find bugs and exploits on the game. It really does prove that they do want to stop people exploiting on the games, but also I don't think hiring the people that were already abusing it was maybe the best decision. And with that note, that will officially conclude this iceberg chart here. This was the longest and most effort I've ever put into a video before, from days of editing to last minute entries, even whilst editing. I really hope it was up to your guys' standards and something you all enjoyed watching. If you're new to the channel, be sure to have a look around some of the other videos I've uploaded too. I upload all kinds of content surrounding Animal Jam. There's bound to be something you'd be interested in, and of course, I'd greatly appreciate it. Lastly, a behind the scenes video of me creating the iceberg chart for this video will be on the way as well. Pretty much me just commentating as I'm making it, explaining why I chose to include certain things or even exclude certain things, you know, a kind of entire thought process, and that'll be up in the next few days for channel members. And of course, a big thank you to the supporters and members of the channel. They got a few sneak peeks at this video before it came out, and honestly, I don't think I would have been able to make it without their support, so big thank you to you guys as always. That'll do it for here, from me, of course. Make sure to let me know some of your favorite parts in the comments, and leave a like if you enjoyed. It would be greatly appreciated. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.